Imagine walking into a building you own, only to be told you don't belong there. That's exactly what happened to Marcus Johnson, a self-made CEO who was told to wait outside by a receptionist who had no idea who she was speaking to. But minutes later, Marcus walked back in and made a decision that would change the company forever. Stay with me, because this story is going to shock you. Welcome to BrainFuel, the channel where powerful real-life stories fuel your mind and inspire your journey. From shocking moments of injustice to life-changing decisions that flip the script, every story here is designed to keep you thinking long after the video ends. So if you're ready for stories that spark change, hit that subscribe button and join the BrainFuel community today. Do you have an appointment? The receptionist asked, her voice clipped, sharp, and dismissive. She didn't even bother to look up from her screen, her manicured nails clattering against the keyboard, as if Marcus Johnson's presence was a nuisance rather than a potential guest. It was a bright Monday morning. The sun's reflection shimmered across the glass walls of Collins and Partners corporate headquarters, a towering building in the city's financial district. Executives in sleek suits and employees with security badges hustled through the revolving doors, each one moving with the urgency of people who believe their work shaped the world. Marcus, however, stood still. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't nervous. He adjusted the cuff of his navy blue suit, his polished shoes clicking softly against a marble floor as he approached the front desk. His presence was commanding, yet calm. He wasn't a man trying to prove himself. He was a man who knew who he was. But in that lobby, none of that mattered. The receptionist finally looked up, her eyes scanning Marcus from head to toe. She saw his dark skin, his closely trimmed beard, his broad shoulders filling out a perfectly tailored jacket. But instead of recognizing authority, she assumed something else. Lobbies for employees and registered visitors, she said flatly, pursing her lips. Delivery workers need to use a side entrance. This isn't the place to hang around. Her words hung in the air, sharp enough to turn heads. A few employees walking by slowed their steps, pretending not to stare, while others stole quick glances before moving on. No one said a word. Marcus paused, letting the silence stretch. Inside, a familiar feeling stirred, a mix of disappointment and resignation. He had encountered this countless times before. The quiet assumptions, the unspoken judgments, the idea that he didn't belong. But what stung more was the confidence in her tone, as if she were certain she knew his place in the building. Keeping his composure, Marcus replied, "I'm here to see Mr. Collins, the chairman. He's expecting me." The receptionist raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. A smirk tugged at her lips, the kind reserved for people who think they're dealing with a liar. "The chairman?" she repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Do you know how many people come in here claiming they have a meeting with him? Let me guess, you don't have an appointment code." Marcus simply shook his head. "No, I don't, but he knows I'm coming." The receptionist leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. Her tone grew sharper, each word like a slap. "Listen, I don't have time for games. If you're dropping off a package, the delivery dock is out back. If you're lost, I suggest you figure out somewhere else. Otherwise, you're just standing here wasting my time and everyone else's." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't snap back. He had learned long ago that anger, while justified, often gave people exactly what they expected. Instead, he let the silence work in his favor. He looked her in the eye, calm but steady, and said, "You want me to wait outside?" "That's right," she replied curtly. "Until you have proper clearance, you don't belong in here." She motioned toward the glass doors with a dismissive flick of her hand. And just like that, Marcus was escorted out of a building he partly owned, outside the city buzz of life. Cars honked, horns blared, pedestrians hurried past with coffee cups in hand, and the skyscrapers towered like silent witnesses. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, his reflection staring back at him from the mirrored glass doors. He wasn't embarrassed. He was reflective. The moment wasn't about him personally. It was about what it revealed. He thought of the young intern who might one day walk into this building, full of hope, only to be crushed by a dismissive glance. He thought of the client who might arrive wearing something simple instead of expensive, only to be told they didn't belong. He thought of every assumption that went unchallenged, every bias that poisoned opportunities before they could bloom. Inside, Employees moved about their routines, unaware that the man standing outside wasn't just another visitor. Marcus wasn't a stranger to wealth or power. He had built companies from scratch, survived failures, and risen stronger each time. His name appeared on financial magazines, though often in small print. He preferred it that way. He liked staying in the background, letting results speak louder than recognition. But in that moment, he realized something important. Staying in the background had allowed others to forget who he was. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to remind them. Marcus slipped his phone out of his pocket and scrolled through his emails. There was the message thread with Jonathan Collins himself. Their correspondence went back months, discussing board matters, restructuring, and the vision for the company's future. He could have shown it to the receptionist. He could have forced his way in with proof. But he didn't, because what he witnessed at that desk told him more than any polished company report or annual review ever could. If this was how the gatekeeper of the company treated people, what did that say about the culture inside? Marcus slid his phone back into his pocket, adjusted his tie, and looked up at the tall building. His decision was already forming. He wasn't angry. He was resolute. This wasn't about a personal slight. It was about principle, about sending a message not just to the receptionist, but to everyone inside. As he stood there, one employee exiting the building caught his eye, a young man in his early 20s, carrying a worn-out backpack and looking nervous, stopped just long enough to offer Marcus a polite nod. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. Not everyone inside had forgotten how to show respect. Marcus returned the nod with a faint smile, then turned his gaze back to the towering skyscraper. In a matter of minutes, the receptionist would learn exactly who she had asked to wait outside, and the company she thought she was protecting would face a truth it could no longer ignore. The wheels were turning. The stage was set. The lesson was coming, and Marcus was ready to deliver it. What no one in that busy lobby realized was that Marcus Johnson wasn't to deliver a package, ask for a favor, or waste anyone's time. He was the reason the company still existed. 2 years earlier, Collins and partners had been on the verge of collapse. The stock price was plummeting. Lawsuits were piling up, and investors were pulling out faster than management could respond. Newspapers predicted bankruptcy within months. Employees whispered in hallways about layoffs, while executives secretly prepared exit strategies to save themselves. That's when Marcus stepped in. Marcus had built his reputation as a quiet force in the business world. He wasn't the kind of CEO you saw flaunting his wealth on magazine covers or boasting in interviews. He preferred the background, moving pieces on the board while others claimed the spotlight. His talent wasn't just in making money. It was in saving companies others had already given up on. Where others saw sinking ships, Marcus saw opportunities. And when he saw Collins and partners spiraling downward, he didn't hesitate. Through strategic investments, clever negotiations, and his own fortune, he acquired majority share of the company, giving him control. The deal shocked the financial world. Few knew Marcus personally, but those who did recognized his brilliance. Overnight, he became the unseen anchor of Collins and partners, the man behind the curtain, ensuring the company didn't crumble. Yet, despite this power, Marcus never flaunted it. He chose to stay low profile, letting the chairman, Jonathan Collins, continue as a public face. To Marcus, it wasn't about ego, it was about efficiency. He didn't need applause. What mattered was results, growth, and the well-being of the people under the company's umbrella. But there was something else, too. Marcus knew how people judge him. As a black man in the upper tiers of the corporate world, he endured every type of bias, subtle and overt, from doubters who assumed he was just a diversity hire to rivals who underestimated him. Marcus had grown used to walking into rooms where respect had to be earned twice over. That was one of the reasons he had stayed behind the scenes. It was easier to shape change from the shadows than to waste time constantly battling prejudice. He didn't avoid the fight. He chose his battle strategically. Still, Marcus believed in experiencing things firsthand. Numbers on a spreadsheet could only tell part of the story. To truly understand a company, you had to see its culture, the unspoken ways people treated each other, the everyday interactions that reveal whether an organization respected its values or merely advertised them. That's why Marcus had decided to come in person today. He hadn't told the board or the staff. He wanted to see the company unfiltered, without the masks people put on when they knew the boss was watching. And in just 5 minutes inside that lobby, he'd seen enough. The receptionist's arrogance wasn't just about him. It was a symptom, a small window into a much larger problem. Because if the very first person anyone encountered in this building treated people with suspicion, contempt, and coldness, what message did that send to clients, partners, and potential hires? It was more than a rude encounter. It was a branding disaster. Marcus thought back to his early career. He remembered being a young man in his 20s, dressed in second-hand suits, walking into offices for job interviews. He remembered the stares, the doubts, the way some people treated him as though he didn't belong. Those experiences had hardened him, but they had also fueled him. They had taught him the value of humility, the importance of listening, and the power of treating people with dignity no matter their appearance. And now, standing outside the very company he controlled, Marcus saw history repeating itself. But this time, he wasn't the powerless young man. He was a majority shareholder, the one who signed the checks, the one who decided the direction of the entire organization. The irony wasn't lost on him. As he stood there, his phone buzzed with a message from Jonathan Collins. "Looking forward to seeing you this morning. The team is ready." Marcus smiled faintly. The chairman had no idea what had just happened downstairs. He also had no idea how drastically the tone of today's meeting was about to change. Marcus could have marched back in, flashed his credentials, and embarrassed a receptionist on the spot. But that wasn't his style. He believed in timing, in letting lessons sink in when they had the greatest impact. If he exposed the truth right away, the moment would be about his pride. But if he waited, if he revealed his identity in front of the board, with the receptionist standing outside that very meeting, then the lesson would echo through the halls of his company for years. Patience, Marcus reminded himself. The strongest blows are the ones delivered at the right moment. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and looked up at the towering skyscraper again. The glass shimmered in the sunlight, reflecting power and prestige, but Marcus knew the truth. A company was only as strong as the people who carried it. And if those people lost sight of humility, respect, and inclusivity, the company was already weaker than it appeared. In that instant, Marcus made a decision. Today's visit would no longer be just about restructuring strategy or financial planning. It would be about culture. It would be about ripping out arrogance at its roots and planting something stronger in its place. Because Marcus knew something most people ignored. Money can save a company, but culture determines whether it thrives or dies. He took a slow breath, straightened his shoulders, and began walking back toward the entrance. The revolving door spun as another wave of employees rushed inside, oblivious to who was standing among them. Some brushed past without a word. Others offered polite nods. It was a mix of indifference and civility, but it was enough to remind Marcus why he was here. The receptionist would learn soon enough. The board would learn. The entire staff would learn. Not just who Marcus Johnson was, but what kind of leader he chose to be. The boardroom of Collins and Partners was a place designed to impress. Long mahogany table, walls lined with framed awards, a chandelier that glittered softly above the executives. It was a space where million-dollar decisions were made and where appearances mattered almost as much as results. That morning, the room buzzed with quiet anticipation. The executives were already seated, flipping through documents, whispering to one another about the surprise, special guest the chairman had hinted at. No one knew who it would be, but speculation ran wild. Some thought it might be a government official. Others guessed a new investor. Everyone assumed it would be someone powerful, but no one imagined who was about to walk through those double doors. Outside the room, the receptionist still sat at her desk. She scrolled through her phone, still smug from the encounter earlier. She had told that delivery guy to wait outside, and she was proud of herself for keeping the lobby professional. To her, she had done her job perfectly. The doors suddenly opened. Every head in the boardroom turned as Marcus Johnson walked in. His steps were calm, deliberate, and unhurried. He carried no briefcase, no stack of papers, just himself. But the weight of his presence filled the room instantly. For a few seconds, silence dominated. The executive stared, unsure of who he was. The receptionist, still standing nearby, froze mid-scroll. Her phone slipped slightly in her hand. Her eyes widened in horror as recognition dawned. This was a man she had dismissed, the one she had ordered to wait outside. Marcus walked confidently to the head of the table, without hesitation. He pulled out the chairman's chair and sat down as though he had always belonged there. The air shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the rustle of paper stopped. Jonathan Collins, the chairman, broke the silence first. He stood, smiling nervously. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Mr. Marcus Johnson, our majority shareholder, and the reason this company is still standing today." Gasps rippled through the room. Eyes darted from Marcus to each other, then back to him. Whispers broke out. Majority shareholder? The man they had all assumed was a stranger, or worse, an intruder, was the one with the most power in the entire organization. The receptionist's face drained of color. She swayed slightly, as if her body could no longer hold her weight. For the first time all morning, she had no words. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't pound the table or demand attention. He simply leaned forward, folded his hands, and began to speak. "Before we get into today's agenda," he said, his tone calm but commanding, "I want to share something that happened to me less than an hour ago in this very building." The executives listened, hanging on every word. Marcus described walking into the lobby, being dismissed by the receptionist, and being told to wait outside. He didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. He just stated the facts. But the weight of his words pressed heavily on the room. I wasn't mistaken for a client. I wasn't mistaken for an executive. I was mistaken for someone who didn't belong. Marcus continued. And while I can handle that personally, I ask you all, what does that say about the culture we built here? If this is how the first person a visitor meets treats people, what message are we sending? No one dared to answer. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Marcus's eyes swept across the table, landing on each executive in turn. How many deals have we lost because someone felt unwelcome? How many brilliant minds have walked through those doors only to be judged before they had the chance to show what they could offer? How many opportunities have we thrown away because arrogance spoke louder than respect? The executives shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their gazes. Others fidgeted with pens or adjusted their ties. But none could deny the truth in Marcus's words. The receptionist, standing outside the door, finally tried to speak. "Mr. Johnson, I didn't know. I thought—" Marcus raised a hand, silencing her. His expression was firm, not cruel. "This isn't about me. This isn't about one receptionist making a mistake. This is about a culture that allows assumptions to go unchecked. If this company treats people like they don't belong, then eventually no one will want to belong here at all." The boardroom remained still. The executives weren't just hearing Marcus's words. They were feeling the sting of them. They knew he was right. They also knew they had ignored these issues for far too long. Marcus leaned back slightly, letting the silence settle before continuing. "This company nearly collapsed 2 years ago. I invested in it because I believed it had potential, not just financial potential, but human potential. I didn't save it so we could repeat the same mistakes that nearly destroyed it before." His voice grew firmer. "If we want to build something that lasts, then respect cannot be optional. It must be the foundation." Jonathan Collins, usually the one commanding the room, nodded in agreement, his expression unusually solemn. The other executives followed suit, their earlier arrogance replaced with unease. Marcus's words had cut deeper than any financial report or quarterly review ever could. They weren't just about numbers. They were about values, about the kind of company Collins and partners wanted to be known as. The receptionist, now trembling slightly, realized the magnitude of her mistake. It wasn't just that she had disrespected Marcus. It was that she had exposed the cracks in the company's image, and Marcus had used that crack to shine a floodlight on everything hidden behind it. The room was no longer buzzing with speculation. It was silent, humbled, and waiting for what Marcus would say next. The silence in the boardroom was thick, almost suffocating. You could hear the faint tick of the clock on the wall, each second dragging out longer than the last. Executives shifted in their seats, some staring down at their papers, others sneaking nervous glances at Marcus. No one dared to speak. The receptionist stood frozen at the door, her earlier smugness shattered, her face pale. Marcus let the silence stretch a little longer. He had learned long ago that silence was powerful. It made people uncomfortable. It forced them to sit with their own guilt and reflection. And right now, that discomfort was exactly what this room needed. Finally, he leaned forward, his hands resting on the polished mahogany table. His tone was steady, but each word landed with weight. "This company has weathered financial storms," he began. "It has survived lawsuits, economic downturns, and the threat of bankruptcy. But I will tell you this: no company, no matter how profitable, can survive a toxic culture. Numbers on a spreadsheet cannot protect you from arrogance, from bias, from disrespect. These things are invisible termites. They eat away at the foundation until one day the whole building collapses." He let that sink in. The executives shifted uncomfortably, some exchanging worried glances. They knew he wasn't exaggerating. They had seen other corporations crumble, not because of money, but because of the way they treated people. Marcus continued, his voice unwavering. "What happened to me in the lobby today was not just a personal insult. It was a window into the soul of this company. And what I saw disturbed me, because of the very first point of contact with this organization. Our receptionist believes it is acceptable to judge, dismiss, and belittle. Then that means we have failed as leaders. We have failed to set the standard." The receptionist's lips trembled. "Mr. Johnson, I didn't mean—" Marcus raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "This isn't about intent. It's about impact. Do you think a client cares what you meant when they feel disrespected? Do you think a young job applicant cares about your excuses when their confidence is crushed before they even sit for the interview? Intent is invisible. Impact is what matters." The room was dead silent. The truth was undeniable. Marcus straightened in his chair. "Effective immediately, there will be changes. Real changes, not cosmetic ones. Not another memo that gets filed away and forgotten. Today marks the beginning of a cultural reset." The executives stiffened. They had heard rumors that Marcus was strict, that he demanded excellence, but none of them had expected this. He laid out his decisions, one by one, like hammer strikes on the table. "First," Marcus said firmly, "the receptionist is relieved of her duties, effective immediately. This is not revenge. This is accountability. A company that allows arrogance at the door sends arrogance all the way to the top. That stops now." The receptionist gasped softly. She wanted to protest, but the weight of her earlier words, "You don't belong here," still echoed in her ears. Deep down, she knew she had crossed a line. Marcus's gaze swept across the table. "Second, every single employee, from the interns to the executives, will undergo mandatory diversity, respect, and sensitivity training. Not a half-day seminar where you sit on your phone, but real training. Training that challenges your biases and forces you to confront them. If you refuse, you will not have a place here." Several executives shifted in their seats. Some frowned, others looked relieved. A few looked guilty, but none dared to object. "Third," Marcus continued, "I am implementing an open-door policy. I don't care if you're a janitor, an assistant, or a senior vice president. Your voice will be heard. Too often, power in this company has been concentrated in the hands of a few. That ends today. Anyone with concerns about culture, about fairness, about respect, will have direct access to leadership. No more whispers in hallways. No more problems brushed under the rug." The chairman, Jonathan Collins, nodded slowly. He had always admired Marcus's vision, but now he was seeing the depth of it. This wasn't just about running a business. It was about transforming it. "Fourth," Marcus said, his tone sharpening, "we will invest in community outreach programs. For too long, this company has only taken from the communities around us. That changes. We will create internships, scholarships, and partnerships that give opportunities to underrepresented groups. People who are often overlooked because they don't look the part. We will not only make money, we will make an impact." His words struck deep. The executives knew that this was not just idealism. It was smart business. A company respected for its values attracts clients, talent, and investors. A company despised for arrogance eventually implodes. Marcus leaned back slightly, his eyes sweeping the room once more. His voice softened, but his authority didn't waver. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I didn't come here to humiliate or to punish. I came here because I believe this company can be great. But greatness is not measured only by profit margins. It is measured by how you treat people when no one is watching. He paused, letting the weight of his words fill the space. This morning, I watched, and what I saw cannot continue. One by one, the executives nodded, some slowly, others firmly. They knew this was not a negotiation. Marcus wasn't asking for permission. He was laying down the law, and with his majority control, there was nothing they could do to oppose him. The receptionist, tears now welling in her eyes, turned to leave. For the first time, she realized the full cost of her assumptions. Her dismissal wasn't just about losing a job. It was about being held accountable for something she had thought would never catch up to her. As the door closed behind her, Marcus spoke again. Let her mistake be a reminder to all of us. Power without empathy is useless. Success without humility is hollow. If we want to build something that lasts, we must first build respect. The room, once buzzing with arrogance and chatter, now sat humbled, united by the weight of Marcus's words. And in that moment, everyone knew they weren't just working under a new leader. They were working under a new era. The board meeting slowly drew to a close, but the energy in the room was unlike any other meeting in the company's history. Gone was the smug confidence, the distracted scribbling on notepads, the constant glances at watches. In its place was silence, reflection, and a collective awareness that something irreversible had just happened. Marcus stood, adjusting his suit jacket. The chair at the head of the table pushed back, with a faint scrape against the floor. His presence filled the room in a way that wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet authority, the kind that commanded respect without demanding it. The executives rose to their feet instinctively, unsure whether out of respect or fear. Marcus didn't need them to bow to him. What he wanted was something far deeper, a shift in mindset. He walked toward the door slowly, each step echoing in the room. Employees had gathered outside the glass walls of the boardroom, whispering nervously, trying to catch a glimpse of the man who had just shaken the foundation of their company. Word of what happened in the meeting had spread quickly. People already knew the receptionist had been dismissed, and they were curious to see the man who made the decision. As Marcus stepped into the hallway, all eyes turned to him. He didn't rush. He paused near the receptionist's now empty desk and turned to face the crowd that had gathered. His voice carried, not because it was loud, but because it was steady, firm, and full of meaning. "Remember this," Marcus said, looking from one face to another. "Never underestimate the person standing in front of you. You don't know their story. You don't know their struggles. You don't know if they're a CEO, a future partner, or someone who could change your life. Respect should never be conditional. It should be the standard." The employees were silent, hanging on his every word. Some nodded slowly. Others looked down, reflecting on moments when they themselves had judged someone too quickly. Marcus continued, "This morning, I was told I didn't belong here. Not because of my work, not because of my history with this company, but because of assumptions. Assumptions about what a CEO looks like. Assumptions about who deserves respect. And that is why we're changing, because those assumptions poison opportunities before they even begin." A young woman in the crowd, an intern with wide eyes and a badge that still looked fresh, straightened in her seat. For her, Marcus's words weren't just about a company policy. They were about hope. If a man who had been dismissed at the door could be the one in charge, maybe she, too, could rise despite being overlooked. Marcus's gaze softened as he looked at the younger employees. "I built my career from nothing. I know what it feels like to walk into rooms where no one thinks you belong. I know what it feels like to be doubted, dismissed, and ignored. And I also know that those very moments can either break you or make you stronger. But no one should have to fight that battle alone. Not here. Not in this company." He let the words settle before delivering the final blow. From this day forward, respect is not optional in this organization. It is the foundation. If you cannot give it, you will not stay here, because success without respect is meaningless. The crowd broke into murmurs, not dissent, but of agreement. The shift was palpable. Employees who once felt invisible suddenly felt seen. Those who carried arrogance in their stride suddenly felt it slip away. The building itself seemed to hum with a new energy, one that had nothing to do with profit margins and everything to do with values. Jonathan Collins, standing quietly behind Marcus, finally spoke. His voice was softer than usual, almost reverent. "You've given us something we didn't even realize we had lost," he said. "Perspective." Marcus nodded but didn't smile. He wasn't here for praise. He was here for change. He turned back toward the glass doors of the lobby. Sunlight poured in, casting his reflection across the polished floor. He thought back to the moment, only hours earlier, when he'd been told to wait outside. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man once dismissed as a nobody was now the one rewriting the company's entire future. But Marcus didn't dwell on revenge. He wasn't interested in humiliation or payback. His mind was already on the employees who would walk through those doors tomorrow, the clients who would be greeted by a new spirit of respect, the interns who would see in him a reminder that they, too, belonged. As he stepped toward the exit, a young employee near the front spoke up nervously. "Mr. Johnson, thank you." Marcus paused, turned slightly, and offered a nod. "Don't thank me," he said. "Make it count. Change how you treat people. That's how we all win." And with that, he pushed open the glass doors and walked into the sunlight. By the end of the week, the story had spread beyond the company walls. News outlets picked it up. Social media buzzed with the tale of the black CEO who had been told to wait outside, only to walk back in and change everything. Some called it poetic justice. Others called it a masterclass in leadership. But for Marcus, it was simpler than that. It wasn't about headlines. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving something right. That respect isn't earned through titles, wealth, or appearance. It's something everyone deserves, no matter what. Inside the company, the effects were immediate. The next time a visitor walked through the doors, they weren't met with suspicion. They were met with a smile. Employees began talking to one another differently. The tone of meetings shifted. Ideas flowed more freely. And for the first time in years, the company felt alive again, not because of profit projections, but because of the culture Marcus had demanded. And for the receptionist who had once dismissed him, she became a cautionary tale. Not a cruelty, but a mistake that revealed something bigger than herself. Her absence was a reminder etched into the company's memory. Treat people with dignity, or risk losing everything. Marcus never gloated, never bragged. He simply continued to lead quietly, as he always had. But everyone who had been in that building that day carried the story with them, passing it along like folklore. Because it wasn't just a story about a CEO. It was a story about respect, about humility, about the simple truth that the person you underestimate today might be the very one who controls your future tomorrow. And so, the man once told to wait outside walked away, not shutting the company down financially, but shutting down the arrogance that had nearly destroyed it. And in doing so, he opened the doors to something far greater than profit. He opened the doors to possibility.